Wow, I'm late to this one. This is the Hyte Y60, Hyte's cool-looking triple glass dual chamber case featuring ultra-thick radiator support. Oh, they do know how to write thick after all. Anyway, this definitely falls into the showcase category. After all, we got 3 individual pieces of glass for, 3 times more satisfying plastic wrap removal, and as a side effect, you have more angle to look at that fancy looking cookie clicker hardware. It's a showcase, but that does not mean that the case can't perform, because it does. But let's start at the beginning. This is a Hyte case coming in exactly what you would expect from Hyte. Cold floor cooling keeps thermals lower than a partially cloudy day with a light breeze and you without a jacket. There you go. Standing on the table, the case is 444mm long, 287mm wide and about 463mm high. Just keep in mind that the side panels on both sides have this overhanging handle attached, so the case is actually like a centimeter and a half longer than on spec. But the point about this is of course that it is not square. The bottom left corner, if you look from the top, is like edged off, and that's where that third plastic peel comes from. Naturally, if you were to position it like a regular case, so like the long side of the case on the short side of your desk, if you get what I mean, you would want to be looking at it from the left side, so the case on the right of you, of your table, of course. Who would put such a gorgeous looking thing on the floor? Alternatively, you can also place it to your left and then turn the whole thing 90 degrees around. This works surprisingly fine. The case isn't too big, like in general, and the placement of the I/O is actually so neutral that both positions work just fine. Or you can also turn it 180 and look at it from the back. I mean, it's your case, do whatever you want. Fun fact, the 1.7mm high feet have a extra kind of shape, for extra like rigidness, and to partially lift it, because this is stable. This shit is stable. Let's just do the review like this. The case comes in 4 no. I'm too afraid. It comes in 4 different colors. The snow white one, which is this one, panda, pitch black, and black cherry. To open it up, we got a screw that secures the left and right side panel. Unfortunately, it isn't catching, so good luck finding that one. And then just pop it off and then pull it up for both sides. For better access, the front glass can also be removed, just like the side glass, but there you have some screws that you need to screw out first. Technically, you can also remove that third glass for like maximum access, but that requires the removal of some additional screws. You can do that. You can also just work around it. I did it and it works surprisingly well. The top panel is just popped on as well, so just pull and there you go. Due to its somewhat compact size, this definitely counts as a mid-tower, and even if Hyte says that you can fit E80X boards in here, don't do it. Sure, you can make them fit, of course you can, but they will just overhang and the cable management is going to be all messed up, and no, just don't. It looks so freaking weird. This is most definitely an 80X type of case. Sure, you can go smaller, but if you don't want to make it look like very weird, M80X is like bare minimum, and just go with 80X. And here we already got the first pleasant surprise, because Hyte knows how much we spend on GPUs, so they threw in the riser. This of course isn't particularly revolutionary, there are cases with risers around, but credit where credit is due. It fits with the design of the case, it comes pre-installed and like pre-bent if that's necessary, and it's PciE 4.0, so no worries about potentially limiting the capabilities of all nowadays existing GPUs. Speaking of which, they can be up to 374mm long and up to 75mm thick, or up to 3 PciE slots in general. Now, something to note here, the thinner the cord, the better it is going to be. Even if there is some space in between the last PciE slot and the glass, you don't want to max that out. At some point, stuff is going to choke. And just in case it wasn't already obvious, this is a vertical GPU only case. Yeah, that riser isn't really there for free. it's there because it's the only way to use the case. Now, in theory, there are PciE brackets present, but those are the shorter ones. And I think it's kind of cool because these are not for your average graphics card. I mean, there are GPUs that come with these brackets, but you don't want them. No, these are, for example, for your network cards, for your USB ports, your RAID controllers, PCIe to NVMe adapters, those kinds of things. Devices that just don't need as much room. And I think it's like one of the coolest features of the case, because one of the things I learned to love are my 10 gig network cards. I'm just not ready to live without them anymore. And these usually come with a short PCIe bracket in the box. And as a nice side bonus, you can use your beautiful looking graphics card to hide your ugly looking network card. Just like in family pictures. On a nicer subject, let's talk about cooling. There are a total of 8 fan spots inside of this case. A 120 in the back, 2 120s or 140s in the bottom, hidden inside this block here, 3 120s or 2 140s in the top, inside this nice looking cage, and another 2 120s or 140s on the side. By default, there are 3 Hyte in-house made 1300 RPM fans pre-installed in here. 1 in the back as like exhaust and 2 in the bottom as intake. So ignoring if you're doing air or water cooling, you actually get somewhat of a decent out of the box case here. If you don't want or you don't have the funds to add more fans or upgrade, you don't have to, but I still would. It's not like they are unbearably loud, they are really not, but I believe they are too loud, or at least for my taste. Like with a standard motherboard and using the standard case fan PWM curve, they are just too loud for my taste. And that's maybe a bit hard on Hyte, but if you look at what you are getting here and you pair this or a case looking like this with components that are appropriately beautiful, it shouldn't be as loud. It should be silent under all circumstances. So they aren't bad. Hyte just kind of created unrealistic expectations because the thing just looks so nice. It's maybe a bit hard on Hyte. If you don't have the cash, they will do until you have the cash. And now let's talk cooling. What a surprise, this thing was made as if the Hyte Thick Q60 water cooler was the only cooler in existence. But it's not a necessity. You can mount up to 160mm high air coolers, so even if you won't get something like a NHD 15 going in here, an Arctic Freezer 36, a Noctua NHD12L, or like most smaller sized 120mm fan-based air coolers should work just fine. But let's be honest, this thing was made for water coolers. On the right side, we got this really deep indentation. And if you want to use that one, you got about 90mm up until you align the radiator fan combo with your motherboard. But if you're planning to sandwich fans and radiators in like the most unproductive way imaginable, you could also go potentially up to 200mm until you start hitting this edge of the glass here. Realistically, it's a bit less, because if you use a GPU which is somewhat, let's say, worthy of a case like this, you will start hitting, like let's say the GPU goes up to here, you will start hitting it at around 175mm. But still, every existing AIO or rad fan combo, even in push-pull, that I am aware of, fits in here. Of course, 240 or 280. The other radiator spot is in the top instead of this bracket. This one supports either 360s or 280mm rads. It can be removed, just a few screws in the top, and then you can lift it up for better access. If you want to use this one with an AIO or a rad and fan, you will need to physically separate the two. One inside of the bracket and the other one mounted below. There is a little bit of a gap in the front, so depending on your specific radiator and where the tubes come out, you might be able to install the rad in here, but it's just no way guaranteed. And you just might end up switching the two. Anyway, inside the bracket, we got about 28mm, so pretty much the standard AIO rad. And below, technically, you could go with up to 40mm, but at this point you will also block off the CPU power connector, so best stay at max 30mm. Which is, by the way, a Fantex T30, so we are still good here. If you ask me, or anybody with working eyes, this thing was made the way it was because Hyte knew the Q60 is coming. Of course, you can make it work with any AIO, nobody's stopping you, or even an air cooler if you really want to, but I mean, look at this. And by the way, Hyte even left small, like seemingly unnecessary holes in the bottom, which can actually be used to fit all of that like the thick wiring of the thick Q60. So this thing was thought through and they knew where exactly the cables would be coming out of. With that said, let's go to the back of the case. It's a dual chamber, so in the back we will find even more empty space that we can fill with cables. The PSU goes in the bottom, and this one can be up to about 270 millimeters until it starts hitting the fan mount. So this isn't quite like do whatever you want area. You still need, space for the wires. So 230, max 240 if you don't want to squish the cables against anything. And right above that, we got some space for storage. Using these brackets, which are accessible from the outside, we can install either two 3.5 inch or four 2.5 inch drives. One at the top end and another one at the bottom end of the bracket using only 2 screws. And now where we are already on this subject, I have a question for the public. Does anybody actually want this? Like, I would regard this as a feature as a plus because, hey, you can remove your hard drive or your SSD without opening your case. I would count that as a plus. But does anybody actually use that feature? Like really? Because I don't. I have never. And cases with that are not as common as they used to be. So I'm just wondering if anybody is actively looking for that feature or if Hyte could have also just, install the cage and saved a few bucks. Anyway, this was pretty much everything you can do inside the Hyte Y60. So now let's talk about how it feels to do it. It was a pleasure. The last build we did inside the Y60 was this 13700K combined with a Zotac 4070 twin edge. Granted, it's a bit short, but it's wide. And we combined that with the Hyte thick Q60 and a bunch of Be Quiet Pure Wings also in white. And it works fantastically. You can check the building video, it will be linked down below, but the CPU never reached even close to 90 degrees when I was running CPU burner, so absolutely fine. For the GPU, it didn't change a thing if I opened up the panel or it was closed. I mean, that's like the best state you can be in, but your mileage may vary by a lot. If you get like a triple card that ends up like glued to the panel, you will start to see differences. But for, let's say, small triple or larger dual slot cards, that's enough, and there is more than enough air coming from the bottom to be pushed in between the glass and the GPU so that it can cool somewhat unrestricted. And the overall build process was enjoyable, with a few asterisks. Like the PciE riser is pre-installed, so you will need to physically remove that part that goes into the motherboard, and that one is also screwed into the shorter PciE slots, so that's a bit of a hassle. And even after removing that part, because you now got this whole thing dangling here, then getting the motherboard in wasn't it was finicky. It wasn't hard, or it was doable, but it was finicky. But what can you do? It's pre-mounted. Then there was also a slight confusion with the top fan spots because of how you route the cables. I didn't use a radiator, I just slapped in a bunch of Be Quiet fans, but there wasn't any logical path to route the cables from that hole to the bag or to anywhere. And I had to find out that actually you just route it straight through, and the top panel is big enough, or there is enough of a gap to absorb that cable. So that's weird, but apparently that's how you do it. The airflow in general, it's a great concept. Cold air from the bottom, by default, great for the GPU, and the thick Q60 is designed to pull cold air from the side, which also works great. Now, if you are coming with another AIO, or if you use this side mount as an exhaust, you can do it, but some longer GPUs have that third fan that blows straight through a heatsink. And if you got one of those and you have a radiator that sucks the air from exactly where that fan would be, you would just end up sucking hot GPU air into the lowest fan on the radiator, and that's a no-no. That's not good. So if you have a short GPU, sure, you can do exhaust, and if you have a very long GPU, just do intake. It's going to be easier. Something that Hyte did particularly well in here is how much air can get through the case. They started slightly weak in the bottom, just with a simple dust filter, but at least this one can be cleaned, and it is only removable if you turn the case on its back, or if you do the Pimp My Ride lift. But from there on, it's just big and open space. Almost the complete back panel is a giant mesh filter with these straight lines to let air through. Except for the spot where you got the drives, cause fuck the fidget spinners. And the top is basically the same thing. In and out, the air can move pretty much freely, but everything can flex. In the end, the Y60 is pretty much the same thing as the Q60 or the FP12 fans. Everything looks nice, but it just feels plasticky. I can flex the back and the top panel without any hassle. Throughout the whole case, I can just press on whatever and it will flex, it will bend. And right now, that's just like my general improvement request for Hyte. Given the price point and the design of their hardware, nothing should flex, like zero. And I am not a particularly big fan of how easy it is to clean all of the dust filters, because except for the bottom one where you have somewhat of an easy access, the top one, for example, great job. And that's what happens if you don't install that securing screw in the back. You don't have like the best access to the mesh part, like in the top and in the back. I guess if you have a vacuum cleaner with like the little like heavy brush on it, you can get around, but cleaning it isn't as easy as I would have wished for. On a nicer note, the cable management is very fine. You got a bunch of room in the back, there is a cutout for your GPU, and you got some protective rubber on that 24-pin bend. Everything looks really nice. The same for the I/O. We got two USB 3.0s, one USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type-C, and a combined audio in and out that you can uncombine with the included adapter found in the box of goodies. Where, by the way, you will also find the PciE brackets needed if you plan to completely remove the PciE riser and have the case work without the GPU, if that's something that you wanted to do. So overall, I'm happy, and I can generally recommend it if you're looking for a case that can do, well, even ultra high-end PC build. As long as it stays on the desk, I mean, it's a beautiful and capable case, ready out of the box. But I would highly recommend to combine it with at least like a 240mm rad to use it on the side, preferably the Hyte thick Q60, because that just makes like aesthetically sense, and maybe replace the included fans. I mean, they could be quieter. Price-wise, it's a yes and no. For about 180 USD, it's everything but affordable. Though I would need to cut them some slack because PciE 4.0 risers are like really expensive. But at the end of the day, it's just expensive, and you will be paying for the design of your finished build. On a side note, if you got even more money to burn, you can also get one of the Y60 specific extensions, like the DIY LCD that you can install on that third glass, which is pretty cool if you want to max out on the waifu aesthetic, or a distro plate, if that's more your thing. But yeah, it's a beautiful case that can push some serious air. It's just a bit plasticky and, you know, I would wish for more metal and like less flex. But okay, this should be all on the Hyte Y60, and at this point a huge thank you to Hyte for sending it over. Oh, on a side note, we have a Discord server, so if you want to join, the link is down below. And we got channel membership, so if you are planning to sell your soul for an RG poop emoji, that's one way to go. But if not, I'm also releasing the content to all members 2 or 3 weeks in advance. Except for the NDA stuff, because, you know, I don't want to get sued. Additionally, you can rest assured that the income will not only keep the channel afloat, but it will also serve to force Hyte to redesign their Y70 and Y50. I mean, the Y60 was exactly 60 liters. That was great. It like tickled all of my OCD receptors. And maybe I could forgive them that the Y70 was 0.7 too much. I mean, rounding errors exist, I can forgive them. But this is just too much. I mean, come on, Hyte, you can do better than this. Anyway, thank you for watching, and if you want to continue, have a look at the video where we built this puppy right here. I just believe it had 2 more fans. That's like the only difference. But thank you for watching, and hope to see you on the next one. Bye bye.